sense of like engagement because I was reading, watching something with Elon Musk, and he was talking about like the input and output of a human, right? So the input is like 1,000 times more than what you can output.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's interesting. So now you engage and trying to engage with your what you know is
because you know, it reminds me too. I told this to the guy, one of the guys last week. Paramahansa Yogananda. He wrote a book called Our Autobiography of a Yogi. I have it. Anybody that wants it, I can send it to you. But in that book, it's a famous book because his teacher told him to go throughout all of India and speak to all the great philosophers of the era. So, like, for example, he actually spoke to Rabindranath Tagore, who's one of my favorite writers ever. He wrote he's considered a polymath. He wrote countless hundreds of poems. He wrote books, plays, novels that are like movies in India now. Like he was a real giant. Beautiful writers, you know. And he also had his own ashrams, like, you know, places where they live and they build, you know. So think of like a law school, but they live there. You know, that's what an ashram is. And
a law school was once like that.
Right? That's why I said that, yeah. But Tagore, so he talked to Tagore, he talked to a young Gandhi. So like right when he's starting to like, you know, throw away the not just, you know, throw away not just European clothes, but also Indian clothes, and he's making his own clothes, like that stage where he's just spindling, you know, his own clothes. You know what I mean?
Spindling.
Because he made it that far, like he was going, you know. So I think he got him right at that stage where he was getting there. So it's still early in a lot of his thought processes. You know what I mean? But then after he was supposed to get all these insights from all of these thinkers, Yogananda was supposed to go to Europe and build with those, and in the book shows all of his travels and all the things that he was picking up. You know what I mean? And that's his famous book. But there's another small book that he wrote. I think it was called Scientific Affirmations, something like that. And it was one of those books I read sitting in Barnes and Nobles. You know, like you take little books so you can finish it.
Right.
And I read it there, and he said this thing like, when you read something, like when you read a book, you should be able to write 3 pages to every 1 page. So the quality of input should inspire you to have all these things. Now, that doesn't always happen. Like, you could look at a page and get nothing out of it.
Right.
But the point was that we really are, like, absorbing mass amounts of information. And we don't get everything out, you know? So sometimes it's like the quality. A lot of times the great creators aren't just in their talent of making the creation, but also in how they get output out of the input. You know what I'm saying? Like how much they process, like how much do they get insights, understanding out of certain things, you know, possibilities, you know. That's why writing a journal is so important though, because you're gonna miss out so many things. At least you could maybe go back a day through this day or the last few days and think about things, or look back on a book and see what was in it. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, and like a journal, I started to write a journal. It was right then when Dayson had told me about the nation. He told me in 1998. And we was doing stuff in magazines and shit like that at the college, right? But he told me about the nation in 98. I didn't go to a law school in 1988. It was almost like a whole year.
Because 99.
Because Dayson was so intent on telling me, you gotta be right and exact or they'll get a universal beatdown. That's not really the case, right? Like if I didn't know anything, I could have came here and said, I don't know, I'm here to learn. But with Dayson, you're gonna get it, you know.
Gives the way he gives it, right?
Yeah, that's how he gave, you know, that's how he was telling me. So I was like, oh, okay. And that's why, yeah.
Oh man, Dayson.
You know? So I was like, I was reading all these books, and I couldn't remember all these books. I read Message to the Black Man, and like, I was 85, so I didn't really, you know, there's a lot to absorb, you know, to say the least, you know? I read, what did I read? Afrocentricity. I read some other books. But the big juggernaut that I read, like the biggest juggernaut I read that time, besides Messages of Black Man, was Destruction of Black Civilization
Oh, Chancellor.
by Chancellor Williams. And I couldn't, it was a lot to absorb. So I got a journal. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to write down everything that I want to keep. Because what I used to do is I used to be in the library and I used to rip out pages. But I was like, damn, this book is going to be thin as hell if I rip out the things I need. So, and I didn't, you know, I was like, I ain't going to put all this money and start doing a million photocopies either. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to write down everything.
It's before PDFs or before...
Yeah, before all that, yeah. So I started to write down everything that was in the book that I found that I wanted to remember or to think about. And then after a while, I started to write commentaries after I wrote it all down. And that became my habit. To this day, even books I own, I write down what I want to remember in there. So I'll write it down, you know what I'm saying? And then I'll comment on it, you know? And I made a plus lesson for that too, if anybody wants that. I call it scholarly notation, you know? And
so this was like a notation on everything that you was reading at the time.
Everything I was reading, yeah. And it became, over the years, it became like the main thing I do in my journal. You know, commentaries on what I see, what I think, all of these things, like what I'm studying, you know what I'm saying? I'll write about movies I saw, like if they have thoughts and ideas, you know what I'm saying? And so I keep all of these ideas and stuff, you know? And commentaries. It also made me practice stuff. So if I wrote about a book that was like a Diop book, right? Like Diop book or Surdama, those are scholars though. So what I would do is I would write back I would try to write back as scholarly as it came across. You know? And if it only developed the ability to speak that way. Peace, God. Everything's peace, God.
They just fly last week.
Oh, indeed.
It was still in the middle of that day.
That's peace, God.
Nice and heavy. You know, El a la sauce. I love y'all.
Likewise, God. Yeah, but yeah. So I started doing that in 1998, you know. And
That's a good way to keep up with ideas, because I mean,
what happens is that I don't always go back to old journals. They just kind of stay stuck in my head by doing that writing process. And then now I've written 70 of them. I've written 70 of them, and in that time,
you haven't published any of them.
No, these are just personal journals though. They're in boxes. I just
Imagine
keep
that being published. That's just...
Yeah. You know what though? There's some of them I can't even read. I write so ugly. You know what I mean?
Oh man.
But obviously the whole thing I wouldn't. You know, they have personal stuff in there. Not that.
Okay. Right.
You know?
Right.
Beef. You know, niggas have beef with, right? Trolls. No,
Trolls and whatnot.
But, now the troll didn't get any. I barely write about that. That's more comical to me. But the thing about it though is that in the journals, I wrote 70 of them. I'm on number 71. But I actually spent about 10 years not writing in a journal, because that was when in the 2000s my writing really took off. Like I started to develop it, and I just couldn't figure out. I had this idea that I didn't want to waste my writing. You know, like writing is the thing not to waste, so I didn't want to waste it in the journal, which was totally wrong. Now I have a totally different approach though. Now it's more like, you know, Curry in the gym. I want to take 1,000 shots in the gym every day. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So at least the bare minimum, I have to write at least 10 pages every week.
Every week. Okay.
Every week.
That's doable. It's 10 pages every
There are
week.
some years where I've written like 25 a week, and that has become, if you do the math, that becomes like 500 pages. You know what I mean?
Right.
But now that I publish so much stuff, though, I'm always going back and forth. You know what I'm saying? And then writing stuff with Kamal. You know what I'm saying? So it's a lot of stuff.
So is that 70 composition notebooks or?
Yeah, except the first one. The first one was like 100 pages. It was a spiral notebook. My
Spiral.
first one.
The very first one.
But then after that, it's all like the classical composition book. Yeah,
7,200 page joints.
7,200 pages. Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
And there's a lot of years I didn't write though. So in those,
What years were those?
mainly in the 2000s.
Early 2000s?
Yeah, because I was still trying to figure it out. You know.
Hmm.
But after the fury began again seriously, where I really was diligent with it, was after my second daughter was born.
Hmm.
So around 2013. So then I was like, I have to write regularly. But for a few years, I only wrote one journal a year, you know. But then after that, I got more consistent. This decade, I read a lot though, on everything, you know.
You mean from 2020?
Since 2020, you know,
Since
like
2020.
I'm a writer and I was in quarantine, so what the fuck happened? What do you, right? We're in quarantine though. What do you, right? I self quarantine, you know, all the time, you know, right? So like, you know, it's always a balance. Like, do I go out and do stuff, or do I? There's a thing, a book. What the hell's the name of it? I always forget the name of the book. Let me do this. There's a book by Balthazar Gracian that's very famous. So I'll tell you how famous Balthazar Gracian. So famous that one of Jesus' greatest lines is from it. The art of worldly wisdom.
Right, I think you mentioned that before.
Yeah. And that's really what Jesus quoted when he says the immortality of my fame is the measure of others' torture. Which is such a dope line though, but it's actually not from Jesus. He quoted it. You know? It's from Balthazar Gracian. But that thing that he said in that book where he said 3 things, you spend half your life learning, I guess in study, you spend half of it doing, and then, not half of it, a third of it study, a third of it doing, and a third of it writing down what you have done. You know? As a writer, though, you're always going in and out of both of those. You're not really in one stage ever. You know? You know, write down what we experience. We go out to get experiences, though, but then we have to also keep studying. So it's kind of more of a juggle as opposed to doing it like that. You know? That's why I stopped writing a journal. When I read that book, I was like, okay, it's going to be 3. Maybe it should be 3. Maybe I shouldn't write in the journals and just try to write only creative things. But, you know, then I realized it's really a combination of all 3. You know? They're all happening at the same time. You know? You're constantly shifting. You know?
If Mega did this.